Thank you all for coming out today. I'm Robert Sterling. I'm the editor of the Marin IJ. And just a few words of introduction. We've been doing these IJ Forum shows for about a year and a half. We've been doing them all in a studio, small, quiet studio. And maybe some of you have seen some of our shows. They've been fine, but I wanted to change things, shake things up a little bit, and take the show on the road, so to speak. And so this is our very first, this is the inaugural session. This is all being taped by our partners at the Community Media Center of Marin, and we'll be broadcasting this show probably beginning sometime next week. We'll be posting it on marinij.com, and there'll be several scheduled broadcasts as well, and we'll be advertising that in the paper. So I just wanted to thank you all for coming. We're happy to be here. This will be the first, I hope, of a number of different shows where we'll go around the county to different towns and talk about issues of concern from city to city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our host, Dick Spotswood, and take it from there. Oh, just one other thing. He's going to talk with our panelists for 40 minutes sharp, and then at that point, you'll be allowed to come up and ask questions. The mic will be right up here at the podium. You can direct your questions to panelists, or Dick will moderate. So thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. I'm Dick Spotswood. It's a pleasure to have everybody here with us at IJ Forums. The topic today is Southern Marin traffic. Traffic tops the list of complaints when it comes to frustrations throughout Marin, but the problem is particularly acute here in Southern Marin. Whether it's East Blythdale and Miller Avenue in Mill Valley, Shoreline in Tam Valley, Tiburon Boulevard in the Tiburon Peninsula in Strawberry, and downtown Sausalito and Alexandria Avenue in Sausalito. And that's not to ignore US Highway 101 from the Golden Gate all the way up to the Sonoma County line. Each year, our roadways become more clogged. What's to be done, if anything? After all, it just may be an inherent fact of life here in Marin, and we need to adapt. Perhaps if we wait 5 or 10 years for self-driving cars and buses, the dilemma will take care of itself, and perhaps not. Past IJ forums have discussed public transit and cycling, but for good or ill, when it comes to mobility in Marin, the vast majority of Marinites use automobiles to travel to work, school, play, and do errands. They're frustrated and angry about the traffic congestion that's negatively impacting their quality of life. Let's talk cars tonight. Our focus is on Southern Marin. To discuss traffic in Southern Marin, we have 3 distinguished, I might say, guests. In the middle, Mill Valley Council member John McCauley. John is a member of the Southern Marin Traffic Task Force. A past Mill Valley mayor, John spent 6 years on the city's planning commission. His profession, he's a CPA, but he's retired. Next to me is Susan Kirsch. Susan is past president of Marin Coalition, was in 2016 a candidate for the Marin County Board of Supervisors from the Southern Marin 3rd District. That includes all of Southern Marin, Mill Valley, Belvedere, Tiburon, Sausalito, Tam Valley, Strawberry, you name it, that's in the 3rd District. Susan's a Mill Valley resident, and she's a nonprofit executive. And on my far right is Bob Harrison, an old friend who's a professional traffic and transportation planner. Bob has served as a consultant for private sector projects as well as a host of Marin County governmental agencies assessing the impact of traffic and suggesting possible methods to mitigate traffic congestion. Bob is a longtime Tiburon resident. Let's start with John McCauley. John, traffic's increased substantially on Miller Avenue and particularly on East Blythdale in the past couple of years. I expect that Mill Valley hasn't seen tremendous population growth. What's your constituents saying about the backups that are plaguing them right now?
Well, our constituents are obviously very concerned about the backups on East Blythdale, and it's been a major priority within our city council for the last several years. And at some point today, if we have enough time, I'll get into some of the significant things that we've already done. We have improved traffic. It hasn't been substantial yet, but later today I'll be able to describe what I like to call the big idea, and I think we have studied things well, and we are advocating for some particular changes which should make things better. You know, the thing about this overpass is it was built in the 50s, and it has had no real substantial change from that date until now. It was designed to cover about half as many cars as proceed through the intersection currently. There are about 80,000 cars a day that move through those intersections. They're very busy intersections, very complex. There's a number of different stoplights involved, bunch of bus stops, pedestrians, it's complex. And the key to really sort this thing out is to put a lot of study into it. And the big picture problem is that the overpass is always clogged. So people getting off of 101 southbound, heading east towards Tiburon, that traffic never clears. And as a result, the Mill Valley traffic, which is attempting to progress to the either southbound or northbound on-ramp, are always stuck, clogged because the thing is not opened up, and then that backs up further and further and further into town, sometimes as far in as Park School, which is a very long distance. So that's the problem, and the question is, how do we solve that problem?
Susan, you've been all over Southern Marin County. You campaigned everywhere for almost a year. And so John's talked about Mill Valley a bit, but what do you hear from your constituents, or your proposed constituents, if you will, in Sausalito, Tiburon, and Strawberry, and Tam Valley? Tam Valley really faces an awful lot of a conundrum on this.
That's true. Well, and I went out to talk to people in Tam Valley, Strawberry, the surrounding area, as much as I did while I was campaigning. And there's one thing that everybody agrees on. I mean, many of the things that John just mentioned in terms of just the frustration of congestion. But the one point that I think everybody agreed on more than anything else is that when we're looking at the issue of traffic, is we should not make a bad situation worse. And there's been some people who have really done some important work around that. The citizens and neighborhood associations and the groups in each one of these communities have prevented 7,000 or more cars from making daily trips on our Southern Marin highways up to this point. And I'll just give you a little bit of a breakdown of how that's worked. That if we look at just Strawberry has done the heavy lifting in that. And the fact that the Strawberry neighborhood and the seminary neighborhood associations came together, they were able to prevent Branson from going forward, which was estimated to have put 6,500 car trips a day on 131 in the Redwood Highway. And on the weekends, it would have been up to 7,500 because of athletic facilities that would have been on the campus. So that's a big chunk. Adding to that, Strawberry also did the heavy lifting as a group of citizens to come forward to object to the change of a proposed deed restriction change and that would have changed an office building in Strawberry to give medical use. So that was another 647 car trips per day. Add to that, in Tam Junction, in Tam, El Monte, and in Strawberry, citizens came together to say they did not want to be designated as a PDA, which would have increased density from 20 to 30 units per acre. So that's another big amount of traffic. And add to that Mill Valley, we've done our little part in Mill Valley by objecting for 10 years or so to that idea of adding 20 units of housing at the heaviest choke point in Mill Valley at the intersection of East Blythedale and Camino Alto. So that's 7,000 trips that have been averted largely through the effort of citizen volunteers and neighborhood associations. And just quickly to say, well, that's really good news. The bad news is that what's on the docket is adding another 8,500 trips a day. Just briefly to summarize that, Strawberry is going to come forward again with a proposal. Tiburon has already approved 43 new units in Tiburon at the Martha property. Tam Valley tonight is having a meeting about 10 new units on Alta Way with 20 vacant lots. Marin City is still a PDA and is looking at having as many as 150 new units coming in to Marin City. So we've avoided a bullet. There's big trouble still on the horizon in terms of just adding car trips per day. 8,500 added trips if these projects all go forward.
Bob Harrison, you've been looking at this for years. You're a veteran Tiburon resident. Population has not dramatically changed in Southern Marin in the last 15 or 20 years. Dramatically, it's changed, but not dramatically. What do you attribute to the status quo that we have today? Why do we have so many cars on the road than we had maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Well, there's several possible answers. A couple of things happened, of course. One of the biggest traffic congestion points in the suburbs is schools. And it used to be so a couple of things. People would walk to school from further distances, and they would have school busing. And both of those things are way down in in the Southern Marin area, although Tiburon has made a good effort. Ross, the school district in Tiburon, in fact, does provide some school busing now. But Tiburon Boulevard is still a mess. If you drive from downtown Tiburon out to 101 in the late afternoon from about 3 o'clock on, it could take you 20 or 25 minutes. Now that's less than a 10-minute drive on a regular day. So you're adding a tremendous amount of congestion there. And there are some things that could be done that would help ease that situation. The intersection at the freeway, which I know John will want to talk about later. There's some improvements that can be made there. The intersection at Trestle Glen Boulevard with Tiburon Boulevard. There are improvements that could be made there. These probably would not completely eliminate congestion, but they would greatly reduce the 25-minute trip at the rush hour. And of course, the schools are working on it. I noticed just the other day in the ARC, there was a description of a electric bicycle plan that St. Hilary's School is trying to put together. Now it sounds terrific because those electric bicycles can go almost anywhere, and you don't have to work real hard, and you don't get sweated up. And I think the way it was working with this one family, the father had a tandem bike, the 7-year-old ran right on the back, and the father brought her to school. So they're going to try that and see how many people will actually do that. That's a good start. But the point being, there are things that can be done, and I'll be happy to talk about them in detail as we go along.
Well, let's get into a little detail with John McCauley. John, I know you've been working and have come to, or your committee has come to a conclusion that really the choke point tends to be the roads around the US 101, Blythedale, Tiburon Boulevard overpass. So tell us what's up. What's on the drawing board?
First, a quick comment with regards to what you were just saying. I would like to say you should also add Mill Valley to that list. Mill Valley, our prior mayor, Ken Wachtel, headed a committee that very quickly was able to get all the various schools to change their bell times. Good. That's a difficult process that involves negotiating with the teachers union, et cetera. And then with the support of Supervisor Sears and the city of Mill Valley, a bus program has been put in place to ferry kids across the freeway to the east side of the freeway from the west side of the freeway. So, and that's been going on for a while now. And in addition to some other improvements that we've made, we have seen the statistics get a little bit better. It's gone from terrible to say bad, but at least it's moving in the right direction. Okay, so the specific, if I may go up and go to this board here, without killing myself. Okay, let's see. Is it going to work?
You got enough wire?
There we go. All right, just to orient ourselves, so there's Strawberry, Tiburon, Belvedere. Can you guys, yeah. Can you maybe sit there?
I was going to say you could put that over here.
Is it okay with the camera guys?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know if I can wire-wise. All right, let's see, I don't kill myself. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Gotta bring my tail. Okay, all right, so here we are. So here's Strawberry, Belvedere, Tiburon. Here's Mill Valley over here. This is a close-up of the Redwood Frontage Road here. Okay, see where we are? This is the overpass, Redwood Frontage Road north, and then of course the freeway is just right about there. This traffic signal right here is the key to the whole system. Okay, this signalization spot has 6 different cycles to it currently. A lot of things going on there. And the issue is the amount of east-west time that is being given to the Tiburon residents proceeding over towards Tiburon. Okay? The more east-west time there is, the more likely that that overpass will not be clogged. What happens currently is that on Redwood Frontage Road there, the people coming up there, they basically, most of them go left and most of them get on the freeway. Right? And then a few proceed in towards Mill Valley. They represent about 15% of the total movements in the system. They get about 1/3 of the total green time. So they're getting a really large amount of green time. And that's fair because they're only moving essentially through a single lane to move on. Right? So if you took some of the green time away, that would make them much more delayed. So the idea is to change the movement from a single lane on-ramp to the freeway to a 2-lane on-ramp to the freeway. And what that does is it allows the residents to go like this and get on the freeway, or on a second lane, go like this and catch the second lane on. So it doubles the freeway access, and when it doubles the freeway access, that will allow the time to go down. If that time goes down, then there'll be more west-east movement for everybody else. And so no one's hurt, but it will improve the overall system. The traffic engineers tell me that this is a solid improvement that is it's doable. It can be done within a few years. The obvious long-term plan would be to make the overpass wider. That's a much bigger effort, right? So our strategy was, let's get something that can be done attainably and be done quicker. So the way that process works is you have to do a study first. Okay? Studies in a range of around $300,000 to $350,000. If you don't do the study, you can't do the work. Okay? Now so the question in the study is, when it's not about money, it's always about money. The question was, who's going to pay for the study? So the county expressed an interest in it, but Tiburon, Belvedere, and Mill Valley got together and said, we are committed to this. We really want to see this happen. And as a result of that, we're throwing in half the cash. And the study is going to occur in the next year. Once the study is done, then we're ready to go in terms of actually getting the project complete. The project is not funded, but if you don't do the study, you don't get the project. So we're going to proceed through all processes that we can to raise the funds to get the project done, but most importantly, we're going to get this study done early so we can have the public interaction, the appropriate views of the various communities that are affected by this, get that resolved, get engineering drawings done, and then proceed to the next step. So that's the big answer. In addition to that, there's already been about a half dozen other things done, and if we have time later, I'll share some of them with you, but it basically surrounds making this intersection more efficient, and there have been some efficiency changes made. Okay?
John, before you finish, I'm going to just throw out a quick question of my own follow-up. As a person who goes eastbound toward Tiburon at that intersection, some frequency, and then goes to San Francisco, why not expand the on-lane into the freeway? Most of us use it already.
Yes.
I understand that the Highway Patrol is kind of generous about overlooking that, but what bureaucracy is stopping that from happening?
So I like to call that the Gary Lyons on-ramp, because our friend Gary Lyons got a ticket there one day and was all upset about it.
Former councilman.
In fact, councilman. This whole process to me has 3 phases. I'll describe that as phase 0. It's phase 0 because we didn't do it, okay? But Supervisor Sears and I were very anxious to do something quickly if it was inexpensive that could resolve problems for us. So that ramp over on the other side there, what happens is you're coming in from Mill Valley, you stop at Park School, you drag yourself all the way down to Camino Alto, you drag yourself across Camino Alto, you drag yourself past the store area, and finally you get to Kipling. You can see the on-ramp right there, you're excited, here it comes, and then you stop, right? And you sit there, and you sit there, and you sit there. You have to wait for 4 more cars. So why not just move that line over? It's the first thing that this committee did, is looked at that question. And interestingly enough, to resolve that was $1 million. And it wasn't a bunch of bull. This is true. The reason was you got that hillside there, right? You've got drainage issues there. You've got several power poles there. There's a bunch of technical reasons, and the civil engineers looked into this in detail, and we came to a conclusion that, okay, this is a symptom. Right? If you take care of this clogging process over here and get everybody moving, you're not going to care about 4 car lengths, right? So we said money is better spent solving the overall problem than solving this one symptom. So that's something that we pursued and resolved.
Okay, I'm going to ask Bob a question, but if you just move your podium back a little bit so we can see Bob on the camera.
Yeah,
not the podium, the easel. Bob, the plan is this is not the first time you've heard about this plan.
No, I recommended almost exactly that plan about 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Got relatively little attention because wasn't sexy enough. Now I will say the good thing about this plan is he's added the bicycles are much more carefully handled in this plan. In the olden days, 20, 30 years ago, bicycles would not got as much attention. But the same concept, the double northbound on-ramp, is the key. And in fact, in those days, I wasn't even going to widen Tiburon Boulevard. I said, use the parking lane. Now, that wasn't real popular with the bank, but that would have been a lane which you didn't even have to remove the curb over to accomplish. In any event, yes, I had looked at that many years ago. And it's a good thing, and I'm glad John is working on it.
And 30 years it's taken us to get today, but that's...
Yeah, well, it'll only be 30 years before it's built. So.
I can't comment. It's not John working on it, if I may.
It's a committee.
Yeah, it's a large committee, and that's the thing about this. To get anything done, you have to have the right people in the room, you have to have good ideas, and you have to have will to get things done. And basically, this committee, sponsored by Supervisor Sears, has the DPW chair, person from the TAM chair, Tiburon, Belvedere, Mill Valley, Caltrans, very senior Caltrans people are there, CHP, and a whole group of registered and civil engineers. These meetings have about 25 people at them, and they've been going on for about a year and a half now to move this ball forward. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to move at the speed of business, not the speed of government, but there are processes that have to occur, but we're moving them as quickly as we can.
Strawberry. We always talk about, we've been talking about Tiburon, and we've been talking about Mill Valley. Susan, I'm going to have a question for you in general about strawberry, but first to Bob and to John. Is strawberry going to be impacted negatively on this, or will they benefit from the what do you call it, the big-eyed area?
Well, this will work for everybody that comes through that intersection. I was just talking with Josh Sale earlier, and he was talking, well, we come up the frontage road, and we want to make that left onto the trail. Well, John was explaining that that's now a double left onto the freeway, as well as a left if you're going across the bridge to get on the other side of the freeway. So it will help everyone. And the keys there, from a traffic engineering standpoint, is the re-engineering of the traffic signal. The signal will be re-engineered so that the green time, as we call it, will be reallocated from one side of the freeway or one side of the intersection to other legs of the intersection, meaning every other leg also gets a benefit, as well as that side that's getting an extra lane.
Susan, you've been lots of folks in Sausalito and have had an interest in that. I certainly know in the campaign, but in after as well. You know, Sausalito, Strawberry tends to be almost overlooked on this. Any thoughts on how the good folks in Strawberry can be brought into the process more?
Well, I think in terms of how you're listing members of this committee, who's missing from this committee is a representative from Strawberry. And especially if we think about the Strawberry, the seminary project is still a big project that's under consideration. It's really important knowing that if it goes forward as still is a part of the plan, is likely to add at least, from the past, 6,000 car trips a day. Mm-hmm. So the fact that is such an essential part of what the neighborhood of Strawberry is looking at, and since that much additional traffic would have a big impact on this, whatever roadways they take, it seems like they really should have a seat at the table. And I know that was a part of what was an issue on the Mill Valley traffic study that led to the yellow bus program, is that there were a few people who were missing from that, not to take away from what a good idea that was to have that committee, but the importance of getting the right people at the table. And so this would seem to be one of the places that there should be Strawberry reps at that table.
Two areas
and the reality is the table is now, right? This is a study that will get input from everybody, and everybody is welcome to provide input through the process. This is not in any way anything in concrete. It's just a rough plan to create the public dialogue, which will include all interested parties.
So that's when you're going to go out in this quote study phase. So I always worry about studies, but the study phase to go out to see where they get the public input.
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
Susan, two areas. Let me start with one that we're not talking about anything to do with this 101 Blackdale Tiburon Boulevard interchange. Strawberry is great, it's covered, but what about Sausalito? They've got traffic problems down there which are far different than we face, because they've got that influx of a couple of bikes companies that just flood the town with bicycles. Thoughts?
Well, that too is likely to get worse. Just this week, Tuesday night, Strawberry City Council Sausalito City Council, with just 4 members, not 5, voted to approve a big expansion of the ferry dock, which is likely to bring more people on the ferry as tourists who will either rent cars, take their car, or to be able to go out to Muir Woods, adding more traffic to Tam Junction, or they will bring their bicycles with them on the ferry to be able to go bicycling into any of our communities. And so, because I value process a great deal in terms of process being linked to transparency and integrity and to cost effectiveness, there's a couple of things about the way this whole process in Sausalito has gone that I think should be pointed out. So I mentioned 4 people, instead of waiting till the November election when there might have been a city council of 5 people to make a decision about this big the dock expansion, seems to be a kind of continuation of what has been a 3-year process of looking to get to this outcome of approving the bigger dock, whether it was in the interest of the city residents or not. And one of the reasons why this kind of push seems to be able to keep going, they didn't have a 3D model to take a look at really how big it is. They had a few, in the same way I was talking earlier about citizen and neighborhood activists who took pictures and circulated pictures, but otherwise much of this has been pushed by the fact that we have such complex ways of making transportation decisions. So with this one in particular, it's that the Sausalito City Council had to vote. Their vote is coming under the auspices of the Golden Gate Bridge District, which is pushing it. That's under the umbrella of the San Francisco Bay Conservation Development Commission. And what I read in the paper today is just that this project gets approval as an $11.5 million project with 80% of the money coming from federal funds. So you can imagine there's a whole bunch of maneuvering and positioning to be able to have that much money come in to do a project that the citizens themselves have not, over the course of the 3 years and a lawsuit, seemed to be particularly eager to have to come into their community to make Sausalito even more of a destination center rather than a community where people pursue their own lifestyle and quality of life.
What do you do
interests
about the
that they
bikes
have.
that are already coming in? It's a hordes of bikes that are coming down Alexander Avenue, dock aside. You got the bikes coming in. What do you do about those?
Well, one thing, I wish we would start licensing bikes. It's not going to mean that it's going to stop those from coming in, but as it is now, we have no way of knowing who those cyclists who are coming in, who are speeding or behaving poorly. So both to add to a revenue stream to help support what the cyclists are doing in any of our, the bridges and the tunnels and all of the expenses that we have for bicycles, it would be a way to just have better monitoring and have some cash flow. And I think what we face is a situation that's bad, and it's going to get worse.
Bob Harrison, an area that intrigues me because I travel through it a lot is Tam Junction. And we have what I tend to call the Charles McGlashan Memorial stoplight and bikeway. And when the stoplight went in, traffic in Mill Valley was impacted and changed. You've looked at that intersection and that whole problem in Tam Valley. What are your thoughts on doing anything?
Well, Tam Valley has one of the key intersections in Southern Marin, which I think I should probably put them all on the table, that in fact are the throats in the system. They are the bottlenecks. In the case of Tam Valley, it is where Shoreline and Almonte Boulevards come together. Now they did, that other signal I think you're talking about was primarily because they couldn't fit bicycles under the bridge.
Right.
So the bicycles
Where they used to go.
That's where they used to go, right. So the bicycles have to go across the street, meaning you have to have a pedestrian crossing signal, and that's where the signal came from. There's not an awful lot we can do about pedestrians. We do have to serve them. I don't know what the numbers are there. I've never counted them there. In terms of counting bicycles, though, I have counted them entering Sausalito. And on that Alexander Avenue, which turns into 2nd Street and Richard, and then finally to Bridgeway, as an arterial street, it is the only arterial I've ever counted where bicycles exceeded the number of cars coming through that street. And that was on a Saturday afternoon, of course. That's when they peak out. Now, Sausalito is working on it, and I can't speak for Sausalito, but I know they have a bicycle monitoring system, and they do require them to park in a particular lot, and I believe they charge them to park in that particular lot. And if they don't, I'm not sure what happens. I assume there's enforcement. But anyway, they are trying to work on that. So that's one intersection. Shoreline at Almonte. Another key bottleneck is Tiburon Boulevard at Trestle Glen Boulevard. And of course the one that we've already been talking about over at the freeway, the frontage road and Tiburon Boulevard. And the one that was mentioned briefly, and I don't think we have an answer for it, but it would have been loved to see a couple of things happen before where we are now, is over at Blythedale and Camino Alto.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if we hadn't built the bank, and we could have gotten that corner, and we could have gotten the Girapoli's property,
Which is
we
empty
could
now.
have put a roundabout at that intersection, and that would have greatly helped to move traffic through there.
All right, let's ask about roundabout, because I know you have also, in your Tiburon work, had talked about one at Trestle Glen, am I right?
That's right.
So, American people, when you and I had talked about roundabouts, I mentioned this to my wife, she says, roundabout?
Yeah.
Why do Americans react to roundabouts?
We hate them, right?
But why is that?
Well, I think it comes from the history. What we used to build in this country was called traffic circles. And traffic circles were typically just a circle with the streets coming in at side of 90 degrees, And the key there is way the circle would operate. In our rules, normally the traffic on the right has the right-of-way. That means if you're already on the circle, you stopped to let people come in from this 90-degree approach. Now, the modern roundabout reverses that. In the modern roundabout, the traffic on the circle has the right-of-way, and the people coming in from the right merge. And the merge is key, too, because the circles are designed, or the roundabouts are designed, with more like an acceleration lane. So you don't have a 90-degree intersection, you have a lane where you merge. These are found to work beautifully all over the world, and only in America has there been resistance to them. But generally, when they're built, they're quite popular. And there are a few around now. And traffic engineers are slowly adjusting to the idea that roundabouts are the most efficient way to run an intersection. Now, the problem at Blythedale and Camino Alto is, of course, there's not enough space to put in a roundabout. But if you could have gotten those two corner lots, you would have had space. Sorry, I don't think we're going to have it there. But we might have it at Trestle Glen at Tiburon Boulevard because we have space. Unfortunately, the space is a park. And you know we can't touch parks. So unless we agree that we could take a little corner out of Blackie's pasture down there, we could fit a roundabout in there, and we would end up reducing the delay for people coming up from Tiburon, try to get to 101, and vice versa.
You know, when preparing for this program, I came to realize and understand that within 3 minutes of where we're sitting right now, there were two roundabouts. One of which you know, the other one I'm going to just challenge you to find out next time you go up Molino Avenue. Of course, there's one right in front of the library, but they don't tend to be controversial. But
they were controversial when we talked about it. I recommended this one out here in front of the library, and it was controversial.
Hey, if I may backfill a little bit on the corner of East Blythedale and Camino Alto, while we don't have a roundabout there, I want to emphasize that the city has been laser focused on improving all our situations in town, and there have been a lot of improvements already made there, and there's more coming. You know, that U-turn has been eliminated, it moves things along. Your right turn has got a longer signalization to it. If you back up on East Blythedale, there are now don't block the box lines all the way back. It used to be over by your house that it wasn't clear whether it was 1 lane or 2 lanes, and that got pushed all the way back to what's the street? To Nelson. It went back to Nelson, which is an improvement. And I've been lobbying pretty hard for this, and I think we'll get it done soon. Is that pocket left, which takes you up on over the top of the mountain? You're always stuck there also because you can just see it ahead of you and you can't quite get to it. There is some room there to push that back a little bit, and that's planned to be done by the end of the year. So those improvements have been made. And as far as the quote-unquote McCutcheon stoplight down at Tam Junction, that light was a disaster for us in Mill Valley. And we basically, as a town, don't control our destiny because we don't own that property, we don't own the freeway property. And what we have to do is advocate with that larger group of people. That big list of people I was talking to you about, the first thing that we met on was this topic. And there were changes made in the way that works. It used to be there would be a left to Tennessee Valley, a protected left, and it would stop the traffic, and we wouldn't get enough green time out of town. That's all been changed now. So there has been an improvement there, and that came from Mill Valley lobbying and the county's willingness to listen to us. And going the other direction, on Miller Avenue, when we finished our Miller Avenue design, we had a design that was very bike-friendly down by the edge of the high school, but it was very unattractive to the Almonte neighborhood. And when that traffic stopped, the Almonte neighbors came to us, I was mayor last year, came to us and said, hey, you're going to kill us with this plan that you've got. And we said, you know, you're right. And we went ahead and changed our design. It went from one that was extremely bike-oriented, bike safety-oriented, to one that we have now, just got marked out a few days ago, which I think works great, that respects, you know, gives bikes a little more safety, but is car-oriented also. You have to balance these things out and make sure that all modes of transportation get their fair share of movement. And so these are examples of things that have been going on in the background in the last several years through intense focus from our city council on this difficult problem.
Susan, you've traveled a lot lately, but any hesitancy about roundabouts? Or are they too foreign for Mill Valley, sophisticated Mill Valley, it's Sausalito, Tiburon to consider?
Well, I do like the roundabout that's here by the library. I like that a lot. But I mean, my experience, I was traveling in Italy, And my experience of the roundabout as you're traveling, coming off the autostrada and traveling quickly or going through some of the areas is that what happened to us is, GPS and everything didn't help us take the right exit of the roundabout, and we ended up going 30 miles before we could get turned around to come back. So if you know the area, small town, like here by the library, it works fine to keep traffic moving. But I'll say too, I was in Minnesota this summer where it seemed very odd to me that what had been four-way stops in cornfield areas, rural areas, are now transformed with roundabouts, which I have to say looked more to me like it was money finding a place to go rather than that it was finding a problem that needed to be solved, where the roundabout was really solving the problem in rural Minnesota. So,
but are they too foreign for Americans? Reject them, or
No. They up in Tahoe. We have a home in Tahoe, and on the road between Truckee and Tahoe City, 89. Highway 89. That used to be full of gridlock around the holidays, and they put in 3 roundabouts there, and they work fantastic. In fact, I knew you were going to talk about them, so being a numbers guy, I've looked into it a little bit. Roundabouts have a 20% reduction in delay because of the fact that there's no stop, there's only a yield. And so all studies show this, Kansas City University study. And as far as safety is concerned, a 37% reduction in all collisions, a 40% reduction in pedestrian collisions, and a 90% reduction in fatalities, according to the IIHS, the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety. So they're more efficient, they're safer. If you got the room, do it, in my opinion.
This topic came up at the Senate Assembly candidates night I moderated a couple of days ago, and one of the candidates said, well, it'll be different when we have self-driving cars, so we won't have any problem.
that's true.
John, I want to ask you about the big solution, the long-term solution.
Yeah.
And I know Bob's well aware of it, that years ago a proposal was made to do 3 lanes across the freeway.
Right.
I mean, there's no money for it now, but is that the vision for the long term?
Yes, this study we're doing will refresh that vision to keep it on everyone's plate, to remind people that it's out there. But that would be one of the intentions in the long run, is to make it either 5 or 6 lanes. It could be 3 both directions, or perhaps 3 to the east and 2 to the west. But we've learned more about that and about construction costs and the like, so it is definitely something on the agenda. But my view is I don't want to spend 20 years pushing for something that may or may not happen. Let's get something done in the short term that will create relief quickly. This to me is a crisis issue, and our council's taken that approach to it, like, let's move, and do as much as we can as quickly as we can.
Well, let's open this up to some questions from the audience, and I'm going to ask you folks to, anybody who would like to ask a question, to come to the podium, and I'm going to ask that you state your name and your hometown for our home viewers so they have some idea of who you are, and to keep your questions pithy, and if possible, direct them to one of the panelists.
I'm Clayton Smith, and I live in the epicenter down there in Tam Junction area, where we suffer this traffic. And I think a lot of it is something that cannot be solved within the current context of our relationship with the tourist industry and the federal government, and their very big encouragement of people to come to the parks, particularly Point Reyes, Stinson's Beach. And that's where we have the tourist traffic there is now all year round and in the week, all week long. But one topic I have noted not being discussed here, particularly with regard to this overpass, is eminent domain. And I think that we should begin to think clearly about the expansion of the road from the intersection of Camino Alto and where all the stores are, so that we actually have a dedicated lane going to San Francisco. We need to have that area opened up, and that means removing those houses that are along that road and bolstering up that hillside. Now, I know this is not a politically popular thing, but I think anyone with any common sense would look at that as being a truly immediate solution for the congestion you have there. And I think that we should look at how much, and I also would like, John, would you tell me in some range how much that extra lane is going to cost that you're talking about on the on-ramp? Thank you.
So let's see. First, the project, the quote-unquote big idea, we'll get a better idea of how much it costs when we do this study, but we're talking $5, $6, $7 million for that. Now, with regards to your idea, I'm glad you mentioned this because I had exactly the same thought a few years back, and I was on the general plan committee, and we actually put in within the general plan the idea that maybe we should push that area from 1 lane to 2 lanes, but it's fascinating. You have to have qualified civil and traffic engineers look at stuff to explain it to you. And then once they explain it to you, you say, oh, I get it. In fact, that's not a super good idea. Reason being, if you have a giant hose and you have a little straw at the end of the hose, doesn't matter how fat the hose is, it's only the straw that's going to dictate the flow of traffic. If you made that 2 lanes versus 1 lane, you just have a bigger parking lot. You wouldn't move cars any faster because they're still stuck down at the freeway. So, which I never thought of until they explained it to me, and I said, oh, that does make sense now. And it's super, super expensive. Get the freeway access resolved at the end, and then you probably may not even need any repair in that area because it used to work.
Bob, I'm going to pick up one of Clayton's comments on Tam Junction. I know you've done some work there on Tam Junction at that intersection with Almonte Boulevard. And last time I talked to you, you had a thought on how that might be expedited.
The key to in Tam Junction, in my opinion, is move traffic through as rapidly as you can. And I think you're right. The National Park Service is encouraging people to come to the parks. And unfortunately, that is the only route. Now, ultimately, a solution would be an alternative route, which I did recommend some 40 years ago. Unfortunately, once again, that was not built. But a national parkway, around Tam Junction would be a great idea, funded by and operated by the National Park Service. However, that probably won't happen, and I don't even know we could get support for it locally, let alone at the national level. But the one thing we could do is we could make that intersection at Almonte and Shoreline work better, and a double left turn lane as you're going out toward the ocean on Shoreline, making that left. That would be a major change in that intersection and make it work substantially better. Now, there's not a lot of space, so it would take some takes here and there. I don't believe any buildings would have to go, but some frontages would get changed in order to do it, but you could squeeze it in. And I have proposed that, and so far I've gotten no good response from anybody at Marin County, and I haven't even tried Caltrans. I don't think we'd do anything without Marin County support.
Sure.
Yes, hi, my name's Richard Marshall, and I live here in Mill Valley. And I have a question, probably mostly for you, John, but others also. I'm wondering if you considered, I like the idea of the 2 lanes going northbound off of Tiburon Boulevard. I think that's great. Did the committee look at the other side as cars are coming up from the frontage road? And right now, I do that quite a bit. And right now, there's 1 lane all the way up, and at the very end, there's 2 lanes.
Right.
But you can't get up there. I want to go left, and I can't get to it. There's sort of a dead area that people ignore. They drive across it. But even if you do that, you still don't have that many cars. So I'm wondering if you looked at trying to use some of the space that's to the north and the west of that uphill and bulking that out to 2 lanes coming up the hill further down.
So the answer is that it has not been studied yet. I can't tell you the improvements that have already been made. So as you climb that hill and you go to make your left turn, it used to be there's a little green light that was there, a small green light. You actually had a protected left. In other words, the Redwood Frontage Road North was never going to run into the cars that were making the left turn. People were going around kind of hesitating, assuming, oh, I got to make sure I'm safe. So what they've done is they've now put a big green arrow there that makes it clear, like, hurry up, get through that intersection as quickly as you can. They've also got more signage down the road as you come up, like, okay, right lane for Tiburon, center lane for Freeway, left lane for Mill Valley. Those improvements have been made. I think with regards to that part that's further down, the long-range plan is to not have any negative effect on Strawberry. The idea is get instead of them having 15% of the traffic and 30% of the time, if we can get that same delay with maybe 20% of the green time or whatever it is, let's do it on that basis. I think if you go down a little bit further, it's the same concept as to what Clayton was saying earlier. It's the size of the parking lot. It's actually not moving traffic. It's at the end where the traffic movement occurs that really affects your overall delay.
Thanks. Anybody else on that? No?
No, I think it's good description. The only issue I have heard, and I hope that this never occurs, is that the county had talked about moving that retaining wall to make the road wider to the south. making that approach wider to the south, and that seems like an awfully expensive way to deal with that intersection. So I think what we're doing here is a lot better.
Sure.
Mr. Spotswood and members of your panel, Doug Ferguson. I've lived here in Mill Valley for over 50 years, and it's been my good fortune to know 3 of you and work with you, including Bob Harrison 100 years ago, together, on various things. And a lot of those things that Bob Harrison and you, Richard Spotswood, and you, Susan Kirsch, have proposed are all good ideas, and hopefully they will come to pass. I have a suggestion, a modest proposal. Let's do some things right now. Everybody says, let's do something we can do quickly. How about something that doesn't require any government studies, any EIRs, anything other than public input? And as Susan said, if people could just get involved. Here we are in a time of total crisis in our little local area because of the fires, and suddenly people are saying, hey, let's work together, let's make it happen. Well, you know what we can do? I'll tell you, I have a good friend and longtime client, Peter Coyote, who said, I'm leaving Mill Valley. I'm leaving this town. It stinks. Everybody's entitled. The traffic's terrible. I'm gone. And I wrote to him and I said, Peter, what time do you get up in the morning? He said, well, I don't know. I have to have my... Peter, what time do you get up in the morning? What if I asked you to get up at a different time of day? He said, I can't do that. I'm Peter Coyote. I said, in Europe, they make people get up at different times of the day. And here, now, I just came under the highway in Sonoma. They give you green lights. What if you had to get up at a different time? Well, I don't know. I know. I just retired a year ago, and I have no traffic problems. 0 traffic problems. I look out, and I say, well, bad time. Stick back. I know my kids have got to go to school, so then I say, kids, let's get up a little earlier. Let's go sit down at the corner. If we just exercise some personal discretion and restraint, this is big and doesn't cost anything other than people saying, yes, it's my responsibility. I'm part of the problem. I'll be part of the solution. It's more than just a silly idea. I think it's a cosmic idea. I encourage everybody who's listening to this to think about it, and then, through metering lights or whatever else, make it happen. Thank you.
It's something that the school district was quite interested in a few years back. As I mentioned earlier, the changing the bell times was a significant change that has had a big impact. Over 25% of our morning traffic has been dropping kids off at school. The other interesting thing is now that Miller is 99% done, the number of bicyclists, the kids who are biking to school, has gone up dramatically. They measure, they're called green rides, and the statistics are quite impressive. And this has been driven by the parents in the community. Now that Miller's safer, I think you're going to see an even further uptick in that also. So I think
to my point,
yeah.
Even before all that happened, if people said, well, I'm going to get on a bicycle rather than in a car, it would
I
all
understand
have
that Mr.
started.
Spotswood one time rode an electric bike.
I rode an electric bike from the, what's the name, Larkspur Landing over here, and it was terrific until the last few feet. McGee Avenue. It was a little tough going up McGee Avenue. But other than that, I have to tell you the greatest treat of the bicycle run was I was going over Meadow Sweet in Corte Madera, and these 2 very fit guys ahead of me with all that Lycra stuff on, huffing and puffing, and they're slow. I'm going up on the electric bike, and I said to myself, I'm going to be a schmuck if I pass these guys. I had to do it. I passed them.
I envisioned you with a smoking jacket with little patches on, and just when I read the article, I was chuckling. Yeah.
So,
God bless you all, and thank you. And just remember
Susan.
my bottom line, no studies, no environmental impact things. Just go home, think about it, tell your kids, tell yourself, and make the change.
Susan.
well, and I want to acknowledge Doug Ferguson as one of those people who was a part of an activist group that prevented Marincello from coming into Marin County. That would have been a community of 30,000 people, and the kind of drastic change that would have brought to our community. And you working with a handful of mostly other volunteers or people getting paid like $1 or something
hothead.
made a significant change, which is really a reason for all of us to be inspired to know what our own activism can do to make a difference.
Yes, individual.
Thank you. Next,
Individual.
please.
I'm Jane Ferguson from Mill Valley. Any similarity in name noticed? I'm the other half. I came with a question, and that is when we moved to Mill Valley 40 plus years ago, kids were assigned to elementary school, the nearest school that they could go to. The boundaries between the schools changed depending on the class loads at the various schools. And the house we purchased was on Eldridge Avenue. In the past, it had been in the Park School District. Then it moved to the Mill Valley, the Old Mill School District. And that was given up some years ago, to my understanding. And parents seem to make a request for a school, and then if they have a sibling in the school or their children are in a school, the siblings get preference for that school. But that results in some kids having to go to a school that is not very close to them. And I have no idea what the impact of that is on traffic. But I know our kids were able to walk to school because it was the closest school, or at least within walking distance. And I just wondered, has that policy ever been reconsidered just to try to keep kids? This wouldn't help with private schools, I understand. But with public school kids, I think it could make a difference.
Thank you, John. Just the city had any thoughts on this?
Well, I can tell you, my wife used to be on the Tam High Unified School District School Board. So I just, from hearing around the house, I can tell you what I've picked up over the years. When we moved here in '84, they were closing schools in town because there weren't any kids around. And the population of the school system went down dramatically. My kids went to Old Mill, and it was the closest school to us. And then as time went on, populations increased again. To give you a sense of it, when my son graduated Tam High, there are about 900 kids at Tam High. You know, there's 1,500 kids at Tam High right now. Mm-hmm. So there's been a
middle school, so
yeah,
I'm aware
of So there's been a tremendous upswing in students, and now I do believe the way it works is if the first sibling gets in there, the others follow, and then they try to fill, and then they push out. The problem, of course, is that Old Mill and Park are the only ones that are really close in, and the rest of them are out closer to the freeway, and all the people live here. So it's definitely a problem. And also the school district, it's like the Vatican and Rome, right? They're separate worlds. But I know that they're very, very cooperative, and I know that's a orientation that they have.
Next, please.
Hi, my name's Rob Martin. I'm the president of the Strawberry Community Association. And with our partners, the Seminary Neighborhood Association, we've done some of the stuff that Susan talked about in keeping the PDA from being developed, turning Belvedere Place from turning into another Marin General Hospital, keeping Branson out, and it's an argument we're still having. I kind of feel like I want to introduce myself as Jon Snow, King of the North, for those of you who watch Game of Thrones, because I'm coming to say there's a big thing that we have to deal with, and it's kind of what Susan was talking about. I'm encouraged that we're talking about this as a area issue. Although we went on to sort of talk about silver bullet solutions in specific spots. I'm encouraged by the point that we've had influence with the county. We've been able to make change there, and that's really super important to us for what I'm thinking about. But we're talking about changing a lane costs $1 million, right? We're talking about $300,000 of study. We're talking about years of time. And as Doug Ferguson was just saying, there are things we can do today. And the thing that we can do today that's most important to me is, we need Strawberry to have a seat at the table for some of these discussions, because the seat at your table is held by the county. We've had, what I just talked about was 4 efforts for the county to try and drive development to happen in Strawberry. We need, as Strawberry, and this is really very much for you, John, and to some degree for you, Bob, if you have influence in Tiburon, we need you guys as partners in this conversation. They're moving forward with EIR studies, and we're fighting a very wealthy oil trust with billions of dollars, who is very focused on developing this property in ways that it's not entitled for. The land use is not planned for that. We're fighting the county to make this happen. We need your voice to be with us. We need you guys to sort of recognize that you can just go to the meetings, you guys can mobilize the city councils, join us, or we can spend billions of dollars in some time down the future trying to figure out how are we dealing with the traffic that we let happen because we weren't paying attention.
Thank you. It's not really a question, but it's a good point, and I really take that, and maybe the word is amen. Next speaker,
If
please.
there's a question, it would be, is there something you can do about it, John? Thanks.
Well,
We have a person in our luncheon group that all of a sudden thinks, do you agree with me?
Well, I will tell you that Mill Valley actually followed all those major processes, and our planners and our DPW provided comment letters on those projects to the focus of, because our interest is how it affects our citizens' traffic. So that we were there from that perspective.
My name is Tony Coyle. I live up on Shelter Ridge, Dead Poets Hill. And when I come down in the morning between 8 and 9, or at lunchtime around noon, or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it is absolutely chaotic trying to get over the freeway. Somebody mentioned earlier on about Mammy and Daddy driving little Johnny and Mary to school. And this is absolutely one of the biggest reasons for the chaos. Whether it's with the schools or with the bus companies, we've got to get the parents to put their children on the buses. It's absolutely essential to get rid of an awful lot of that traffic. It just doesn't work. It stops it dead. And you've got the guys coming up on East Blythedale, and they come up once they come through the narrow there, they split, and then they want to get back into the right lane so they can make a right turn. And this chaos, it really is. But the buses. Now, I understand some of the schools have changed their ring times so that the children can come at different increments of time in the morning. That's a good idea. Can we get all the schools in Tiburon as well as Mill Valley to do that so that it spreads out the traffic half an hour or so?
Well, Tony raised a good point, and I'm going to go back to what Bob's comment earlier on Tiburon Boulevard. Particularly, it's not exactly where you live, Tony, but if just as a good example of the phenomena, the afternoon when schools let out on Tiburon Boulevard is incredible. I mean, it's worse than the morning commute.
It is,
and it would seem because of the kids are coming from certain locations. I mean, defined locations. What can we do about that?
Well, they have done something, and I think John mentioned it in Mill Valley as well. The Reed School District has in fact reinstituted busing. Now, the problem is they have to get the parents to pay money to put the kids on the buses. It's not a district provided service. Some parents are signing up, and it has made a difference. But just in general, the thing that you're absolutely right about, in the suburbs, the greatest traffic issues we have are at the schools. It's not actually the home to work trip. It's not the commuter trip that is necessarily the worst, especially on the local streets. Now, the freeway is still an issue, but the local streets are frequently most congested by the schools. In Tiburon, just for example, seeing we're there, from downtown Tiburon, 4 miles to the freeway, less than 10-minute drive at a normal time. When the school is getting out, and even days when the school's not getting out, 20 to 25 minutes is typical for that same 10-minute drive.
Getting through Trestle Glen
the
at
Trestle
8:30
Glen
in the morning
intersection, absolutely. Well, as I say, we could knock 5 minutes off of that easily if we had $10 or $15 million ready to go. That's all we need, but that's the problem. We don't have it, and besides, there's a park. So.
And I think your electeds 100% agree with you, because when electeds do budgets, if you do one thing, that means you're not doing something else. And the county has supported, right, the city, the Mill Valley program and the Tiburon program. The city of Mill Valley and the city of Tiburon have supported their individual programs, putting money towards the each of those bus systems, and then the parents are kicking in the cash to make it balance.
Susan.
But I got data from the school district which shows that the school bus ridership is down, that it was higher in 2016, 2017. It's now down It was 76 users in the morning, 69 in the afternoon. It's down now to 59 in the morning and 56 in the afternoon. And that's on buses. This seemed really odd to me, but I'm told that the bus capacity is 80 riders on 2 of the buses and 65 on the other. So ridership capacity is really like 26% of the buses being used, which would seem to say we could get much smaller buses so they're not taking up as much space on the roads and still transporting the kids who are using the bus.
No,
So there's some
we want to
tweaking.
get the parents to put all of the children on the buses. One bus with 80 children takes a whole bunch of cars off the road.
Yeah. You know, there's also
We should make
you
it a
see,
law.
It's a suburban phenomenon that's almost in the ethic now, with parents being supercharged parents in the old days.
Right.
My parents never drove me to school in my life, you know.
Yeah, right.
But now you're guilty if you don't take the child by the
Yes,
hand to
Mr.
the
Lincoln.
school.
Well, they didn't have cars back then.
Well, the municipal railway is what we had. Well, great. This has been a very good panel, and I want to thank you, Tony. And thank the audience for coming today. And we want to thank the folks, John, first of all, John McCauley, it's a pleasure. Susan Kirsch,
pleasure.
Bob Harrison, thank you for being part of this. And thank Angie Bremer and the Mill Valley Library staff for being super cooperative and putting together a very, very fine operation. Marin Community Video is our partner in all this, and we want to thank them as well. And we want to thank the folks at home for listening. You can see this show on the IJ. Look at our website. It's a click away. It's 24 hours a day. Once we launch, which will probably be in about 10 days or so, and then it'll be available on Marin Community Television. The IJ will publicize the times of the show, so you can watch it there. And it usually ends up on YouTube. So that means that anytime you're can't wake up in the middle of the night, it's 3 o'clock, you're thinking about traffic, you're saying, I got to find out what's really happening.
May we call you?
Yeah. And plus, we did this show without a study. And we didn't have an EIR in setting this up, and we made it all happen, and you did too. So thanks for watching, thanks for coming tonight to IJ Forum. I'm Dick Spotswood. Good night.